Hello there, my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these Waves Braided Wirework Bracelets. So we're using quite a simple technique for this, but depending how you're adding your beads you can get different variations. And just to let you know, these will be available for sale in my shop. Link will be in the description box down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how you can make it, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. Now the wire I'm using is a regular round copper wire and the gauge is a 0.8mm. And as for the beads, we need 3mm rounds. Now the specific ones I'm using are faceted blue coated hematite gemstone beads, but of course you can use whatever you prefer. Just make sure the wire can go through the holes. And to finish off the ends of the bracelet, I'm using these ribbon ends here that have some loops we can attach our findings to. And I'm using a lobster claw clasp and extender chain and a couple of jump rings. And along with the ribbon ends, we also need our E6000 glue for a strong bond. Now we also just need a couple of tools. So of course I got my flush cutter so we can cut the wire, tweezer nose and chain nose pliers for the ribbon ends and the jump rings. And finally, I've got a spring clamp to help hold the wires in place while we're braiding. So the material list and useful links will be in the description box down below like usual. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. Now the lengths of wires that we'll need to cut is 9 lengths here of about 30 centimeters each. And what I've done is I put the ends together and then I put them into my spring clamp. So now they're ready to start braiding. So to get started, what I want to do first of all is just separate my wires out because we're going to be working with them in groups of 3. So the 3 outer wires on one side, just pull them a bit out to that side, and the same with the 3 on the other side. So we now have our 3 groups of 3 wires. And then basically what we're going to be doing from here is just a basic 3-strand braid, but working with each group as if it was one length. So I'm also going to make sure that all the wires within one group are going to stay aligned flat next to each other. So I'm just going to start on the right side here, and I'm going to bring that over the one in the middle and have that become the new middle one. And as I'm doing that, I'm making sure, like I said, the wires stay flat next to each other. And then I'm going to pull the one from the middle further out to the side where the other one came from. So they kind of swap places there. And then I'm just going to push this middle one that I just brought in down a little bit so it's away from the others. And then the one on the left side here, again, I'm going to take all the 3 wires in that group as if they were one and bring them over that middle one and in to be the new middle one. And then we can just straighten everything back out. So I'm just going to do a few stitches in the braid here before I start adding beads in, just so we have a little length to finish off with at the end. And what I like to do is before I move the next group of wires, I'm just going to push down the group that I'm going to go over with it a little bit, because that ensures that we can make it tighter. So then take the outer group there, bring over that inner one and become the new middle one. And then we can just flatten it back out and repeat a few times. So bring the outer one into the middle, and I keep my fingers on the groups as I'm moving to make sure the wires stay flat next to each other. And I'm just going to do another couple of movements like this before we then start adding in the beads. So to add in the beads, what I'm going to do is before I take the outer group of wires there and start moving it, I want to add a bead to it. So I'm going to single out the inner wire in that group. Then I'm going to take a bead, add it onto that wire and let it drop all the way down. Now what you're going to have to do is just push it down with your finger to the point where it can't go any further there, so it's up against the other group of wires. So as you can see, that bead is just kind of separated out the wires a little bit, but just bring them back together and keep working with them as if they were just one length, and make sure they stay lined flat next to each other. And then bring in this group over the middle one, just continuing that regular 3-strand braid. And as I'm doing that as well, I like to make sure to put my fingers on there so that the wires stay flat next to each other and don't start overlapping each other within the group. And you can see then that bead fits just perfectly in that little corner. So now for the group on the other side, I'm going to first of all just single out the inner wire in that group. Then I take my bead, add it on and let it drop all the way down. And again, make sure to push it so it can't go any further. Bring the wires back together before we then bring them over that middle group and in to be the new middle group. And as I'm doing that, I'm making sure everything stays flat next to each other. And again, that bead just fits perfectly in that corner, and they're just kind of surrounded by the outer wires in the groups. And this is basically all there is to it. So as you can see, it's a simple 3-strand braid. The only difference is we're working with multiple lengths at a time. And again, before I move this outer group, add the bead to the inner length of wire, bring them back together, and then over that middle one to be the new middle one. Make sure everything stays nice and flat. Go to the left side, separate out the inner wire, add the bead and let it drop down, Make sure it's pushed all the way in and bring the wires over and into the middle. So you can see this is the effect we're going to get. Now you could also achieve a different look by using the exact same technique, but only adding the beads on one side of the braid. Then it could end up looking something a bit like this. So you can see it's the same basic technique. We're just adding the beads on one side, and it gives quite a different look than if you add the beads on both sides. So obviously that's completely up to you and your personal preference. Just continue braiding however you prefer until we have the length that we need. Once I then reach the other end here, I've got the length that I need. Then we also just need to make a few more stitches without adding beads in, just so we have this to finish it off with. So to finish off the ends, what we need to do is be able to attach the ribbon ends here onto the ends. So of course we need to get rid of the excess here. So what I like to do is place my ribbon end where I want it to sit, and that'll then give me a guide where I need to cut. So of course we need to make sure that the wires will fit inside of the ribbon end. So basically what I want to do is start from one side and just cut all the way across to the other side in a straight line, something like that, because then the ribbon end will fit just perfectly over the end here. But what I also just need to do is add some glue to this, because we need to make sure it's obviously going to be durable. So I'm going to grab my E6000 here, and then just using a toothpick as an application tool, I'm then going to get the glue inside of the ribbon end. Make sure to cover the inside walls, something a bit like that. And then what I have left on my toothpick, I usually like to then put on the end of the bracelet itself, or you can also add some more glue. And just make sure to get it in between the wires there, because that way when we put the two pieces together and the glue dries, they'll adhere nicely. And then what we're going to do is just put the ribbon end on top of the wires there. Then grab my chain nose and start squeezing this tight. So I just put a finger on either side to help hold it in place, and then gradually push this close until I'm almost all the way down, and then I just like to check that it's still in the middle, and then I go in and do my final squeeze to make it nice and tight. And I also like to go in from the sides just to close those up as well. And then of course we want to repeat the same on the other end, and you then have these holes in the ribbon ends so we can attach our findings. Then all that's left to do is shape the bracelet here so we can wear it. So what I'm going to do is just go in and start putting a curve into it, and gradually go from side to side, getting more and more of a curve. You can see like this. I'm not going to go into one place and just put a big bend, that'll put it out of shape, but just get a gradual curve going back and forth. And then the aim is to get the two ends closer together, so we can of course use the clasp. You can also shape it around something that has a size and shape you want it to have, like a bracelet mandrel, or you can easily use your fingers like this. And we can then use the clasp, and the bracelet is finished and ready to wear. So as you can see, with this technique you can easily get different variations depending how you add in your beads, but they all equally have a nice impact. Now don't forget, these bracelets will be available for sale in my shop, but if you want to support me in another way so I can keep making these tutorials for you, you can always like, subscribe and share, and there is also the super thanks button down below. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.